A woman helped kidnap a 12-year-old boy. She was there when he was taken, there when he was hurt, there when everything spiraled into a nightmare. And yet, she walked out of court free. No prison time, no years behind bars, just gone. The question haunting everyone is simple: how? This is the true story behind a case that left an entire community stunned and asking whether justice was truly served. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe if you love real crime stories that expose the truth others overlook. Now, step into the darkness behind this case if you can handle it. The February air in Dayton, Ohio, carried a strange stillness that night. A thin layer of frost clung to windshields, streetlights flickered along quiet blocks, and most families were settling into their evening routines, doors locked, curtains drawn, unaware that a crime was about to unfold in the shadows. At exactly 7:10 p.m., a call hit the Montgomery County emergency line, frantic, breathless, and almost incoherent. A child was missing. Not just missing, taken. A 12-year-old boy had been pulled from his home and forced into a vehicle. He'd been heard screaming. And then, silence. Police units flooded the neighborhood within minutes. Flashing lights painted the houses red and blue. Officers knocked on doors. Families stepped outside trembling, and the night that had started so normally suddenly felt like it was collapsing in on itself. Detectives quickly pieced together the first chilling detail. This wasn't a stranger abduction. The prime suspect was someone the boy knew: DeMarcus Pleasure, a man who should have been a protector, not a threat. And he wasn't acting alone. A woman, 33-year-old Rika Jermell, was with him. Neighbors had seen them earlier that evening circling the block, headlights off, moving too slowly to ignore. What drove them? What pushed grown adults to target a child from their own family circle? No one knew. Not then. The police began tracing their vehicle through traffic cameras, and what they saw added a thick layer of dread to the unfolding timeline. The car passed through several intersections at moderate speed. No panic, no reckless driving, just a cold, steady path toward the outskirts of the city. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned. As the hours stretched on, detectives dissected every lead. A witness stepped forward, a young teenager who said she saw the boy being guided into the car, not dragged. He looked scared, she whispered, but, like he didn't know what to do. That alone gave investigators a knot in their stomach. Manipulation was often far more chilling than force. Sometime after midnight, officers found the boy. He was shaken, disoriented, and hurt, but he was alive. And that was enough to ignite the full force of the investigation. The real question now wasn't whether a crime had occurred, it was why it had happened at all. As the boy was taken to safety, detectives turned their focus to the suspects. Pleasure was located first, arrested after a tense standoff that ended without further harm. But the woman, the one neighbors described as calm, quiet, and strangely in control, was still missing. And the community was asking the same question detectives were whispering behind closed doors. What role did she really play? Because some believed she was just a bystander, others thought she was the mastermind. And police were about to uncover something that shifted the entire direction of the case. When investigators traced the last known location of Jermell's phone and approached a small, dimly lit residence on the west side, they found something inside that changed the entire narrative of the night. Something they hadn't expected. Something that made prosecutors rethink the charges. And it was hidden behind a door none of them wanted to open. The house stood at the end of a narrow street, its windows dark, its porch light burnt out. It was the kind of place that made officers reach instinctively for their flashlights, not because they expected danger, but because something in the air felt wrong. Detective Laura Mendes led the entry team. She had handled dozens of kidnappings, but something about this one, about the woman involved, kept tugging at her instincts. Inside, the air was cold and stale. The floors creaked under every step. Nothing looked disturbed, yet the silence was unnerving. A cup sat half-finished on a table. A jacket lay draped over a chair. Someone had left in a hurry, but not in chaos. More like they vanished mid-thought. Clear the kitchen. Clear the hall. All clear, except detective. There's a locked door here. Mendes approached it slowly. The door was unusually reinforced for a bedroom to deadbolts, a slide lock, and fresh scratches near the handle. It didn't match the rest of the home's worn-out interior. It looked new, deliberate, purposeful. "Kick it," she ordered. The door shook on the first hit, then snapped open on the second. And what they found inside didn't just deepen the mystery, it reframed the entire case. The room wasn't a hiding place or a storage closet. It was almost empty except for a single metal chair, a lamp, and a pile of paperwork scattered across the floor. Financial forms, handwritten notes, addresses, and a list of phone numbers with one name circled over and over: Rika Jermell. Mendes crouched to study the pages. They weren't from the boy's family or connected to the kidnapping. They were tied to Jermell's private life debts, disputes, a months-long conflict with someone who seemed to have a hold on her. One line caught the detective's eye. He said, "I have no choice." That was the first moment investigators realized this case wasn't as straightforward as a simple act of cruelty. There was context, pressure, and a relationship dynamic no one had expected. Leave it to crime to twist itself into knots. Minutes later, officers found Jermell herself only a block away from the house, walking alone down the street. Not running, not hiding, just walking, as if she knew this moment was inevitable. When officers approached, she didn't resist. She simply lowered her eyes and whispered, "Is he okay?" Meaning the boy. It wasn't the reaction they expected. Not from someone the public already viewed as a villain. At the station, as detectives interviewed her, the pieces began sliding into place. Jermell admitted she was there when Pleasure took the child. She admitted she was present through the terrifying ordeal. But she insisted she had been pressured, pushed, and threatened by him for months, the very kind of control hinted at in the notes found behind the locked door. Still, she hadn't stopped him. She hadn't helped the boy. She hadn't called for help. For investigators, that was the hardest part to reconcile. As the interviews went deeper, prosecutors began sorting through which charges would stick and which ones they could realistically prove in court. The difference between being present and being responsible was huge. The difference between acting under pressure and acting willingly could shift an entire sentence. Meanwhile, the community grew restless. News spread fast. Parents whispered about consequences, justice, and what should happen to anyone involved in a child's abduction, no matter the excuses. Social media churned with anger, disbelief, and questions. Why did she do nothing? How much did she know? And what exactly was in those documents hidden behind that locked door? But just as detectives thought they understood the true motive, just when the case seemed clear, another discovery hit their desks. One that would reshape the charges. One that would leave the public stunned. And one that would explain how a woman involved in a kidnapping would soon walk free. The courthouse in downtown Dayton was unusually crowded the morning Rika Jermell appeared for her preliminary hearing. Reporters lined the sidewalk, microphones angled toward the doors, waiting for the woman whose name had exploded across the news. Parents wanted answers, prosecutors wanted clarity, and the public wanted to understand how a case that seemed so clear-cut suddenly began to blur around the edges. Inside, Detective Mendes sat with the stack of documents, the notes from the locked room, transcripts from the interviews, and the timeline investigators constructed minute by minute. She had walked into this case believing she knew exactly who played what role, but now, doubt threaded quietly through her thoughts. A prosecutor slid into the seat beside her. "We have a problem," he murmured. He opened a folder. Inside was a written statement, one signed by multiple witnesses. People who knew both suspects. People who described a long, troubling pattern between Pleasure and Jermell. Pattern of control. A pattern of intimidation. Something that prosecutors had only suspected before, but never fully understood until now. She wasn't the initiator, the prosecutor said, tapping the folder. Legally and realistically, her level of responsibility is shifting. We need to rethink which charges can hold. Mendes frowned. She was still there. She still allowed it to happen. And she admitted it. The prosecutor replied. Which may end up influencing the court more than you think. The courtroom doors opened. Jermell walked in, guarded by deputies. She didn't look defiant or angry. She looked drained, like someone who had been carrying too much weight for too long. She scanned the room only once at no one in particular, then sat with her attorney. Across the aisle, the boy's family watched her with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Even though the child was safe and recovering, the emotional damage lingered. And knowing that one of the adults involved might receive a reduced sentence felt almost impossible to accept. But the law deals in evidence, not emotion. The proceedings moved slowly at first, with prosecutors laying out the timeline of the night. They emphasized the seriousness of the crime. They explained the danger, the planning, and her presence during every critical moment. The room stayed silent except for the clicking of keyboards from court reporters. Then Jermell's attorney stood. His voice was steady, almost too calm for a case this tense. He presented the documents found behind the locked door. He detailed months of escalating threats and manipulation, explained the witnesses who had come forward saying she acted out of fear rather than intent. He submitted text messages, statements, and past reports that painted a picture no one expected to see. But the moment that shifted the entire courtroom happened when he read a single line from a statement made by the boy himself. "She didn't hurt me. She just stood there, like she was scared too." The room froze. Even the judge leaned back slightly. It didn't erase anything. It didn't justify her silence. But it revealed something prosecutors had to factor into their decisions. Jermell's role wasn't the same as pleasure's. And in the eyes of the law, distinction matters. At recess, Manda stepped into the hallway to clear her mind. What bothered her wasn't whether Jermell deserved punishment, she did. What bothered her was how easily the truth could twist depending on where you stood. From the boy's family's perspective, she was part of a nightmare. From the evidence, she was someone caught in a storm she couldn't outrun. As Manda stared down the hallway, the prosecutor approached her again. "We're considering a deal," he said quietly. "Lesser charges, time served, no additional prison time." Mendes inhaled sharply. "She walks? If she accepts responsibility for what we can prove," he replied. "Yes." But before she could respond, a deputy rushed toward them. "Detective, the boy's family wants to speak. They found out about the deal, and that meeting raw, emotional, and tense would shape what happened next. Because the decision to let her walk would divide the entire courtroom and ignite the story that would soon go national." The conference room behind courtroom 3B was too small for the amount of emotion that filled it. The boy's family sat at one end of the long table, his mother clutching a tissue in one hand and a photo of her son in the other. Beside her, relatives whispered in frustration, anger, disbelief. They had heard rumors of a plea deal, but now it was confirmed. Prosecutors were considering allowing the woman involved in their child's abduction to walk free. Detective Mendes stood in the corner, arms crossed. She wasn't speaking, just watching. She knew how these moments could fracture a family's trust in the justice system. She also knew the law didn't work on emotion alone. The prosecutor began quietly. "I want to explain the reason we're offering a reduced agreement to Miss Jermell. We have evidence she acted under pressure. We can prove her presence, but not her intent." "And intent?" the boy's mother interrupted, her voice shaking. "She stood there. She watched my son being taken. She watched everything happen. And you're telling me she didn't intend to be part of it?" The prosecutor exhaled slowly. "Ma'am, if we move forward with the original charges, we risk losing the case against her entirely." The mother stared at him, stunned. "So instead she gets to walk? Just like that?" Mendes felt her chest tighten. She had stood in this position before, caught between the emotional devastation of victims' families and the technical limits of the law. She hated it every time. It never got easier. "We understand this is painful," the prosecutor added gently, "but we must work within what we can prove beyond reasonable doubt." The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the courthouse ventilation filled the air. Then the boy's uncle leaned forward, voice tense. "So what does she get?" "Nothing. 2 convictions, the prosecutor replied. Criminal trespass and child endangerment. She has already served several months in jail during the investigation. Under this deal, that counts as her full sentence." The mother covered her face with both hands. A soft, heartbroken sound escaped her. It wasn't fair. Everyone felt that. But fairness and legal reality weren't always the same. When the family meeting ended, the prosecutor stepped into the hallway. Mendes followed, "You're sure this is the right call?" she asked. "I'm sure it's the only call we can defend in court," he answered. "If we push harder, the defense will tear the case apart. We'll end up with no conviction at all." "And the public?" Mendes asked. "They're already watching. They'll have questions," he admitted. "But the evidence speaks. And when something is impossible to prove, we have to make the deal." With that afternoon, the courtroom filled again. Reporters lined the back row. The deputy escorted Jermell in slowly. She looked nervous, her eyes darting from the attorneys to the gallery where the boy's family sat silently. The judge entered. "This court has reviewed the plea agreement," he began. "Miss Jermell, you are pleading guilty to criminal trespass and child endangerment." "Yes, Your Honor," she said softly. "And do you understand that by accepting this plea, the remaining charges including kidnapping and abduction will be dismissed?" "I do." The judge nodded. "Very well. Based on time served, the court will not impose additional jail time." A wave of whispers swept the gallery. Some gasped. Some shook their heads. The boy's mother looked down and closed her eyes. Jermell swallowed hard. This wasn't triumph, her expression made that clear. It looked more like resignation, relief mixed with shame. She understood what the public didn't. Freedom sometimes came with its own weight. As deputies released her from custody, reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Do you feel remorse? Why didn't you stop him? Are you grateful you're walking free?" She didn't answer, not one word, because the twist wasn't that she walked free. The twist, one the public didn't yet know, was buried in the final police report, in the last interview, and in details the courtroom never heard. And when those details surfaced, they would ignite a storm far beyond Dayton, a storm that would challenge the meaning of justice itself. The day after the verdict, the courthouse steps became the center of a growing storm. News vans lined the sidewalks, cameras rolled nonstop, and commentators debated every angle of the case. Headlines flashed across national outlets. "Woman walks free in child abduction case. Plea deal sparks public outrage." Did the system fail? But inside the Dayton Police Department, away from the noise, Detective Mendes sat alone at her desk, staring at a thin file, the one labeled Supplemental Interview, R. Jermell. It held the final twist of the case, the part the public didn't know, the part that shifted everything from black and white into shades of painful gray. The interview took place after the plea agreement was finalized, when Jermell finally spoke without fear of incriminating herself. She revealed details no one had heard before, details that prosecutors legally couldn't use as evidence because they emerged after the deal was signed. Not excuses, not justifications, but truth. She admitted she had known pleasure for years. She admitted he had become unpredictable, controlling, and increasingly aggressive. And she admitted something even Mendes didn't expect. She had tried to distance herself from him months earlier, but he wouldn't let her. The notes behind the locked door weren't fabricated. They were warnings she had written to herself, reminders to keep away, attempts to document what she feared she might someday need to prove. But the part that struck Mendes hardest came near the end of the interview. "He told me if I didn't go with him that night, he would go alone," Jermell said quietly. "And I was scared of what he might do without anyone there." The room went still. Mendes had spent months replaying the night of the kidnapping. She imagined Jermell as passive, scared, frozen. But this confession revealed another layer. She believed her presence might prevent something worse, even though she never made the right choice to intervene. It didn't absolve her, but it made her part of the story, tragically human. As Mendes closed the file, she felt the weight of the entire case settle in her chest. The criminal justice system wasn't built to satisfy emotions, it was built to follow evidence. And sometimes, evidence left gaps that felt impossible to explain to the public. By noon, the police station was flooded with calls. Reporters wanted statements. Commentators demanded answers. Families across the community wanted reassurance that what happened in this case wouldn't happen again. Mendes finally stepped outside, needing air. The winter wind cut sharply across her face. Just as she reached the bottom of the station steps, she saw the boy's mother standing near the curb. She looked exhausted, drained in a way no amount of sleep could fix. "Detective," she said softly, "I heard you talked to her again." Mendes nodded slowly. "There were things she said that we didn't know before." The mother's eyes glistened, but not with anger, with something closer to grief. "Does it change anything?" she asked. "A little," Mendes answered honestly, "but not enough to erase what happened." The mother inhaled deeply, then exhaled a long, trembling breath. "That's the hardest part," she whispered, "knowing she walks free, and we still have to rebuild everything." Mendes wished she had the perfect answer, something to make the pain smaller, something to make justice feel complete. But real cases rarely wrapped up neatly. Sometimes the truth didn't heal, it simply revealed. That evening, as the story spread across national headlines, the public argued endlessly about the verdict. Some believed the deal was fair, most believed it wasn't. And a small few recognized what detectives already knew: sometimes justice isn't clean, sometimes the truth doesn't fit neatly into the courtroom, and sometimes the system chooses the only outcome it can prove, even if the world wants a different one. In the final police summary, Detective Mendes wrote one last line: "The case is closed, but the questions it leaves behind may not be." If you thought this case was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.